Hi, I'm Cory Martin.
And I'm Leslie MacNabb.
And we are the co-owners and co-founders of the Recovery Revolution, which is a recovery platform that seeks to support and provide a place for healing and understanding for anyone who loves somebody who is in need of recovery from addiction, mental illness, or other experiences. So what you're about to see is a Q&A from one of our live sessions within our program Heal for Real, which is a 6-month recovery incubator for partners of those who are in need of recovery. And this Q&A, we're going to talk a little bit about how to find the best addiction resources.
Our next question is, what are your go-to resources for learning about the science of addiction? In my case, alcoholism.
Well, I'll tell you first what they're not. So in this day and age, when we want to learn about addiction, especially alcoholism, the first thing to do is to sort of guard yourself against the cultural zeitgeist of what is presented as common knowledge or what everybody knows about addiction. Because what everybody knows about addiction has been proven in many ways over the past few decades to be patently false. And believing those things hurts us. It hurts us to believe things that, like I said, don't serve us, that aren't true. But it also can hurt those who are struggling by having a world that works against what's happening in their brain. So for me, the best place to go to learn about the science of addiction is actually not necessarily groups that are focused on addiction. It's not necessarily, a rehab center. It's not necessarily those places that are very addiction focused, because most of those are informed by what we all know about addiction, which are not based in fact. They're not based in scientific fact. They're not necessarily based in research. Many of them can be, but just because something is an addiction resource, quote unquote, doesn't mean that it is scientifically informed. So the place that I like to go for literally learning anything about human beings, their minds and their behaviors, is to neuroscience. I look at what we're learning now about the science of the brain, how the brain actually works, as well as the science of consciousness, beliefs, and how these things are formed, how these are formed through early trauma, how they're formed, how we create adaptations for our survival, what happens chemically in the brain that manifests as behaviors. Those are the things that I think are the most important to learn about addiction. And you can learn those by listening to people who teach about neurology and neuroscience. So someone that I really like, a few different people who've talked about both addiction, but also habit forming and changing behaviors and understanding how the brain works, is Caroline Leaf. That's Leaf, like on a tree. And then also Dr. Gabor Mate. I love all of his work. He has very interesting work about how trauma affects, or how trauma manifests in addiction, in different disorders, how certain behaviors can lead to different medical experiences. And a lot of his work is in the field or in the research of psychoneuroendoimmunology, which is a big word that basically just means the mind-body connection, but in a medical research sense. And I highly recommend all of his work. Everything he does, even if it's not about addiction, is still very informative about how our patterns dictate our outcomes. And then Caroline Leaf's work about neuroplasticity and how the brain can change, but also how the brain can get stuck in the patterns that it's in, and what we can do to restructure that, what we can do to soothe that and work our way to a better experience through empowering ourselves with the knowledge of how it works and the processes that work to get us out of it. So those are my go-to resources. And I will honestly say, just Googling like, why do alcoholics do this, is really not always the best way to go, but going for like how this affects the brain, or looking for specific people, looking into research papers and seeing what actual scientific research has been done in these areas, rather than anecdotal stories and shares from people who may have their own personal narration of their experience, but isn't necessarily factual and doesn't necessarily inform you about other people's experience.
I was looking behind me because I was looking for my book, one book that I wanted to recommend. The author is Dr. Peter Levine, and he does a lot of trauma research, neuroscience as well. And another resource that I love is research and research studies.
Mm-hmm.
And, you always have to kind of think about the source, like who's paying for it. That always comes to mind. Who asked for this research?
Right.
Who's paying for it? Those kinds of things. In anything that you're looking for, any resources. And so far, and I don't know about you, Cory, but SAMHSA has seemed pretty reliable, which is the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration, as far as they have lots of research and resources on their website.
Mm-hmm.
And as far as I've seen, it's been
pretty consistent. Yeah. And well, they're also, I know they're very good. There's a few other like nonprofit organizations that are like more research driven. And the best way you can know if something that you're looking up is based in some kind of a scientifically founded fact is do their articles, do their explanations, cite sources. Is there a link that you can click, like a little 1 next to it, or a 5, or a source, anything that you can click that takes you to a study? If what you're reading is, it sounds purely anecdotal, or if it resonates with you a lot and sounds a lot like your personal experience, those are the most fun to read, but we really have to be the most careful about them, because that's where we run into confirmation bias. When we hear something that's a story that really fuels how we're feeling, but doesn't really give us more information, we can decide that we've researched something and come to a conclusion that isn't necessarily a fact and doesn't really expand our knowledge, and that can often even just make us more confused in the long run, because we've just had our beliefs confirmed by a maybe not so reputable source. So that's actually honestly something that I've thought about even doing like a short workshop or something on, is like how to do research, because learning how to research your opinions in a scientifically sturdy, what's the word I'm looking for? Strong, essentially like an intellectually strong pursuit of knowledge, I think is really important and can help you a lot, especially when it comes to sort of like combating negative beliefs or concerns about like how you're feeling about something. If you see something happening that shouldn't be happening, like there's a saying that a lot of people pass around in rehab, that you're shoulding all over yourself. You can stop shoulding all over yourself or shoulding on other people when you actually understand the facts of what they're experiencing and what you're witnessing. But you can't really fully understand those facts if you don't learn how to research it in the first place. So that's something that, like, dedicate your time to really learning how to learn how to research, and then just diving into it. Like there are a lot of good resources out there. And honestly, for me, one of my favorite resources is YouTube. I use YouTube so much more than I use Google. I'll YouTube like specific questions, and then I'll look for maybe a podcast done by someone or an interview with somebody. And if I see, okay, Dr. So-and-so, Google that person. What are their credentials? Okay, now I'm going to listen to this and see what they actually have to say. And actually vetting your sources in advance, so you're not cluttering your brain with absolutely every piece of information or biased opinion that you could ever find on the internet, which is infinite.
Yeah. So I hope this answer was helpful, and keep the questions coming. We love to do this.
It's so fun.
Yeah. And we will see you soon.